To conclude our chapter on hierarchies, I'd like to show you a common problem that many users have that has to do with non-uniform scale in an animated hierarchy. In general, all objects in a hierarchy should have scale values of 100, 100, 100%. And if that's not the case, then you will probably have issues when you rotate child objects. Here's a simplified version of a robot arm that's a good illustration of the problem. I've linked all the parts except for the bottom parts here. Just to illustrate that, you can see if I rotate this, all these others are rotating as well. So I've got a box down here, and that's going to be the base of my robot arm, but it's not tall enough. If I didn't know any better, I would just stretch it up by scaling. And again, this is a problem. I'll go ahead and grab the scale tool, and down here at the transform type in area, watch these numbers. I'll scale it up in Z to make it taller. And X is 100, Y is 100, and I'll set Z to be about 400. It's about 4 times its original size. And I release the mouse. And that seems okay, it looks fine. Now I'll go ahead and link the rest of the hierarchy to this scaled box. I'll click the Select and Link button and link this shoulder object to the box. And then I'll test this. I'll select the box and rotate it around, and that looks okay. I'll select this elbow object and rotate, and that seems okay. Then I'll select this shoulder and try to rotate that, and oh my goodness, that is not okay. That is an issue. We're seeing this very strange and bizarre scaling artifact. The reason this is happening is because of 3ds Max's internal order of transform operations. The position is calculated, then the rotation, and then the scale. And those transforms are calculated relative to the object's parent. And what that means for us is that these child objects are being rotated and then scaled relative to the parent. And then additionally, 3ds Max has sort of gone behind my back here, and it has applied an inverse scale to this child so that when the rotation value is 0, it looks okay. But that's deceptive. If I have that child object selected and I go to the Scale tool and right-click on it, you'll see that the absolute Y scale is set to 25% or so. And that's the inverse of the scale of its parent. In other words, the parent was scaled up to 4 times its original size in Y, and then the child was scaled down to 1/4 of the original scale in order to compensate. If this had a value of 100, then all of the children would stretch out. So this is clearly not what we want. How do we avoid this situation? I'm going to hit Control-Z a few times and get back to where I was originally. I'll break the link here as well. Just go ahead and click on Unlink Selection. And you notice as soon as I did that, the scale reverted back to 100%, and that's good. To avoid the problem, don't non-uniformly scale anything. Or if you do, you'll have to take steps to correct it. The easiest thing to do here is to leave the scale at 100% in all axes and simply change the height parameter of the box. I can set that height to be 4 times as high, or 50 times 4 is 200. And that's going to be just fine. I haven't scaled it at all. And that's the optimal solution. However, if it's not a procedural primitive object, then you can't just adjust its parameters. What if it's an editable poly or something like that doesn't have those parameters? I'll set this back down to 50 and then convert it to editable poly. Right-click, convert to editable poly. And in this case now, I don't have any parameters to adjust. Instead, what I'll do is I'll just go into polygon face selection mode, grab that top face, and simply move it up. And that's not going to affect the transform scale at all. If I go back to object level, you'll see the scale values are all still at 100, 100, 100. That's one solution. I'll undo that. Another solution would be to scale all the polygons at the subobject level. If you've got a complex shape and you need to stretch it in some way, you can't just select one polygon and move it. You'll need to select all the polygons, drag a box around that, And I can scale up here at sub-object level. And I'm looking at the bottom of my screen, and the Z scale value is about 400 now. And I'll release the mouse. And I'll need to position it up as well. But having done it this way, I have not changed the scale values at the level of the object. Instead, I've changed the shape of the object at sub-object level using the Scale tool. Now, I know that's not a very obvious distinction because I've clicked on the same button to do it. But the difference is whether I'm in sub-object mode or object mode. And if I do a scale operation at sub-object mode, I'm affecting the shape of the object without changing the transform values. And to prove that, I'll go back up to the Scale tool, and you'll see that I've got scale values of 100 in all axes. Now I simply create my link and do a test rotation, and everything's fine. Now, what would you do if you accidentally scaled the object at object level, or maybe you got a scene from someone else that had been non-uniformly scaled? What would you do in that situation? I'll reopen this scene file to illustrate what we can do in case we get into trouble. Let's say I select the object and then scale it up, and it's got a non-uniform scale of about 400 in Z. I can reset this back to 100 and preserve the existing shape. To do that, I'll go into the Hierarchy panel. And in the Adjust Transform Rollout, there's a button that says Reset Scale. I'll click on that, and now all three of the X, Y, and Z axes have a scale of 100. And now this is safe to link up. Just go ahead and link it, and do a test rotation, and everything's fine. And that concludes our chapter on hierarchies, best practices for transform coordinate systems, pivot points, linking, and scaling.